Just, okay. You can go ahead. Reid, you should obviously should introduce your subject.
Okay, we're working on our anti-smoking project, and
Introduce Dr. Jones.
this is Dr. Jones. Okay, is smoking hazardous to health?
Yes.
Okay, what are the harmful substances found in tobacco?
Well, tobacco and cigarettes has a number of different carcinogens and other elements that are added to it. Besides just the tobacco, the nicotine content is enhanced, but then there are a number of other things that are in the tobacco that are cancer-causing. So it's a very complex mix that they wind up with.
What harm do these substances cause?
Well, most people tend to think of it as causing lung disease, but really cardiovascular disease is the #1 association with cigarette smoking. So not only are there problems with cardiovascular disease and things like lung cancer and emphysema, but cigarette smoking is linked to a number of other diseases as well: breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, atherosclerotic disease, and the list goes on.
Okay, would cigarettes with a lower tar and nicotine content be less hazardous?
No.
Okay. What is smoke-free tobacco?
Well, tobacco can come in any number of forms, and smoke-free is typically things like dip or snuff or other things that are used that aren't smoked.
Is smoke-free tobacco a safe substitute for ordinary tobacco?
No.
What is the death rate due to various smoking-related diseases?
I don't have the numbers specifically off the top of my head, but there are any number of smoking-related diseases like, for instance, COPD, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. So we think that perhaps around 100,000 people a year die from that.
What are other risks faced by mothers who smoke in particular?
Mothers will have problems with underweight children, babies that are born, and they have nicotine or substance addiction, and they may have other health-related issues.
What risks are faced by pregnant women who smoke by their unborn babies?
Underweight is the primary problem.
What is passive smoking?
That's where you inhale smoke that other people are smoking around you and in the room. And unfortunately, it can be just nearly as risky to have secondhand smoke exposure as it is to be the primary smoker.
How is this dangerous to non-smokers?
Those people have an increased risk of having smoking-related diseases because of it. Things like, for children of smoking parents, asthma and ear problems in particular. For others, particularly for spouses that have lived with smokers for a long time, they can have COPD, lung cancer, pancreatic cancers, any number of things that are related to the cigarette smoking.
What advice do health authorities give on smoking?
Don't smoke.
What is it? What is THC?
THC is tetrahydrocannabis. It's the active component in marijuana.
What is the average amount of THC in marijuana?
Well, I don't know what the average amount is. It varies a little bit based upon the way the marijuana is grown and produced. Typically, the marijuana now has much higher concentrations of THC in it than, for instance, what was typically produced 20, 30 years ago.
What are the dangers of using marijuana?
It can have just as much injury to the lungs as can cigarette smoking. In fact, probably more so because the dwell time or the inhalation time is longer than typical cigarette smoking, so those people end up with heightened exposure time than people who are just cigarette smokers.
What are the effects of marijuana on the brain?
Marijuana is kind of a depressant type drug, so it slows thinking and impairs judgment.
What are the effects of marijuana on the lungs?
Well, it can be just as harmful as cigarettes, in fact, sometimes more so.
What are the effects of marijuana on the heart and blood pressure?
Typically will lower blood pressure a little bit. Heart function, I don't think, is typically bothered other than the effect of the smoke, which can cause atherosclerotic disease.
What are the effects of heavy marijuana use on learning and social behavior?
Well, those people tend to have impaired learning problems, and they also are sometimes have impaired judgment.
What are the effects of marijuana on pregnant women?
It can be the same as cigarette smoking with underweight births.
What kind of people would you attract smoking cigarettes, and what kind of people would you repel?
Well, smokers tend to attract other smokers, and people who don't like smoke don't go around people who smoke. There's a segment of the population, and they tend to be lower socioeconomic, that are drawn to cigarette smoking, and those people, unfortunately, oftentimes spend a lot of their disposable income diverted towards things like alcohol and tobacco rather than more productive enterprises.
So what kind of social problems would people smoking face?
Well, there may be the fact that they're ostracized by non-smokers, and many communities now have anti-smoking laws so that it's difficult for them to access restaurants and other public places. But also because of the smoking and being ostracized by others, they sometimes are left to their own devices. That is, they don't interface as well socially as people who are non-smokers, particularly since they tend to be in the minority now and ever more so becoming a minority. And again, because smoking tends to be primarily a lower socioeconomic activity, those people sometimes find themselves excluded because of lack of income or disposable income because it's being diverted for other things.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome, Reid. Thank you.
Hey Reid, you might. Okay.
Please explain what you do in the medical field.
I'm an expert, a subspecialist in pulmonary diseases. My expertise is in pulmonary critical care, and I see a lot of people who have smoking-related problems.